receive a briefing and update enterprises to create difficult conditions of very limited space. We are trying visual meetings. We have started already if conditions will be in some venue in Parliament. On the operations, you need pipelines, freight rail, container terminals, reports regarding the introduction of private players. We hope that we will get details of that. So in the same way, public institutions to address our current challenges, private sector, otherwise there's nothing we can do with public partnership. In for complaints from missed. Of course, I'm not a labor court, but oversight means looking after everything. You cannot ignore some of the from workers. Therefore, they must get information. At one point, we had a meeting with the access to a forensic report, which they believe has vindicated them. These employees have made to the High Court about those kind of information. Ours, of course, is not to take sides on it and be inspired to the those powers, but it's important to be kept abreast and to be in the same way interested in how the community treats and deal with its employees, because at the end of the day, the services that we would like to be delivered are going to be delivered by the employees. You will receive grumpy and unsatisfactory services. That's why to us it's very important to know those, including how you are supposed to be serviced. Therefore, honorable members, and our invitees, we would like to get that briefing. We hope those kind of questions, including other questions that will be asked by members. The department will first have to get apologies from the Secretary, Mr. Muchumi.
Good morning, Chair and honorable members. The apologies I've received is from Mr. Kwanko, who is attending a meeting. And obviously the minister and the deputy minister were unable to be in the meeting today. However, from Transnet and the DPE, the delegation is comprised of the following. The acting DG is Ms. J. Mulisan, who is part of the meeting. Mr. I. Naidu, the chief specialist for transport entities. From Transnet, we've got Ms. M. Miletape, who is a board member. Ms. P. Delby, who is the GCE. Dr. A. Shaw, who is the group strategist. Mr. J. Mdaiki, who is a TPT chief executive. Ms. P. Silinga, who is TNPA's chief executive. Mr. M. P. Phillips, who is a TPLCE. Mr. R. Mills, who is a TECE. Ms. Ellen Bocha, who is a TPCFO. V. Nemukula, who is a CPO. And I. Mateka, who is the chief of people management and learning. That's the delegation from Transnet and DPE, Chair.
Thank you, Chumi. Members at the end of the day, we went by
It's me, my hand has been up, Chair.
Why your hand is up while I'm still speaking?
Yes, I thought you'd recognize me after you finished speaking, Chair.
Okay. Accounting officer, we will give it to the accounting officer.
Good morning.
And okay, before that, everything did you?
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good morning. Chair, I did not hear the apology of the minister and deputy minister. I just heard Mr. Muchumi saying they won't be with us today. So is that an apology or are they absent? I need to know because we need to register them in the minutes correctly. If they are absent or they send an apology, and what is the apology?
Okay, they are written. Both of them sent formal apologies regarding the results. I think that is acceptable, members. Everything did you? And then after we'll give all the other people the chair of the board.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members. Good morning, colleagues. Chair, thank you very much. I wanted to also formally indicate that Minister is attending the cabinet meeting, hence he was not able to attend. I want to indicate that the board of Transnet as well as the management of Transnet is here to make a presentation and we have submitted the presentation accordingly to the committee, and the team from Transnet Board and Management will take the members through it, and we will be supporting them from the department, and we've got some representatives from the department who've accompanied us. And without further ado, Chair, can I probably, if it's in order, then hand over to the colleagues from Transnet who will be taking us through the presentation today. Thank you, Chair.
The following person, I think, is the board member. GCE, are you available with your board members?
Honorable Chair, honorable members, good morning. I need to also, unfortunately, I was trying to check company continue. I'll start the presentation and we'll then get somebody to
Go ahead.
We have the rest of the EXO who will help with the questions. I will ask if the presentation members, thank you once again for giving us the opportunity to come and present on Transnet. It remains a pretty rough period for us, but I hope that as we go through the presentation and you see the actual progress that is being made in most of the operations actually, you will feel some sense of movement forward. I'm still waiting for the presentation, please. I can't. You will see some sense of progress, Chair. There's a few matters that remain, and we'll talk. I mean, I suppose we will start there. Chair, just
in the meantime, GCE, can I request honorable members who are writing on that block to just stop, because that is unparliamentary. Thank you. Continue.
Thanks, Chair. I must say I support you 1000%. That I hope the next time we have this meeting, it's in Cape Town, not with this electronic system. But Chair, I mean, the biggest news that's been in the paper lately is around fundamentally the performance of rail. We start off the presentations to give you a sense of what are the core drivers of the state that we're in with regards to rail, and then indicate progress in as far as the rest of the, in terms of implementation of the strategy, and answer on socio-economic developmental impact that we're having, and I suppose our posture going forward. And Chair, as usual, I'll raise some issues which we believe need urgent attention, especially as the system is opening up to third-party access. So to start off, with regards to the TFR, there are a couple of issues that we are dealing with that relate to rate. So because fundamentally what we understand as our mandate is to move cargo, products, either mining commodities or agricultural commodities, or the enablement of that movement from wherever it is in the country to the nearest port as efficiently as is possible, and actually at the least cost possible, because we understand that for exporters, the 700 kilometers or so, for example, from Gauteng through to Durban, is a dead weight loss because nothing happens to the cargo in transit. It's just the cost of movement. So when you look at what we see as binding constraints, and I have to change that word because I don't think that they are binding constraints per se, except for in the moment they are. But these are issues that we are dealing with. There's the issue of the locomotives, and I'll go into detail around the locomotives in the next slide. The issue, if you recall, the 1064 contract that we entered into was to buy 1,064 locos, was suspended in December 2019. Most of the issues that we have that relate to locomotives at least affect the newer fleet that we have, are tied up in the issues that we have at present in terms of local availability. Now, the rest of the fleet that we have is an older fleet. In the next slide, I'll sort of like indicate the numbers that we have. Now, in as far as when the contract gets set aside, we are not at full delivery of the locals. I think the number we had delivered was about 587 of the locals that were due to us and had not arrived at the full complement. So you have that first issue that you need to deal with. And also because the strategy was to run some of the older locals out and start replacing them with the new locals. Even the old locals, which may have been reliable workhorses, have been run nearly to the ground. And so that's why their reliability has also gone down. So that's the one issue that you have to deal with. And as far as infrastructure is concerned, when Transnet undertook the investment to buy the additional locals, the question was, the assumptions at the time was that the South African economy would be growing by 5%. And if the South African economy was growing by 5%, we would be able to make additional revenue and would have been able to easily fund infrastructure maintenance and also at the same time fund the maintenance of the rolling stock. Now, obviously, the economy, as we all know, in 2019 was at 0.9% GDP, I think, and that 5% never materialized, and because the 5% never materialized, the revenue never materialized. So as Transnet, we had choices to make. And the fundamental choice was, do you pay your debtors or do you pay the banks, or do you invest, fund the infrastructure, or do whatever else? So the decision that we made as Transnet was to continue paying off our debts. And that meant that whatever was left over after that, we then needed to split across the divisions so that we would be able to meet at least part of our obligations. Now, the problem with that is that as you reduce the amount of maintenance that you undertake on track, over time, you wear out, you reduce the capacity that you have available. And then lastly, the issue of security will show you the slides and the data around security incidents. These have markedly increased. And in the impact, because especially on the heavy ore system, which is single line and with points for loop extension for trains to pass each other more often than not, whenever you have cable theft on those systems, you have a roll-on effect on the entire system. And we'll show that in the data now. Next slide, please. So starting off with the locals, right? So the first top left is an indication of the total order, the quantities ordered from each of the OEMs. And then we have what was actually delivered by each of the OEMs and an indication of what's outstanding. In the case of WebTech, as is indicated, all of the locals have been supplied. And in fact, in as far as, because the whole 1064 contract was set aside, so we needed to review every single one of the contract. In the case of WebTech, all legal matters actually are finalized, and this is now a matter of court process to get to the agreement being an order of court. So, all good. In the case of CNR, they were the other supplier of the diesel electrics, no, the diesel locos. The order was 232, only 22 of those were delivered. Unfortunately, on that contract, the plan, and we've indicated that to CNR, the plan is to cancel that tender because the 22, of the 22, as you see in the column to the right of that one, is 15 of them are actually not operational as we stand. And they were a problem from the get-go, from delivery. Now, we then left with CSR and BT Alstom. In the case of BT Alstom, 240 were ordered, 89 have to date being delivered, and so we have outstanding about 155 locos from them. Now, what's important and noteworthy in their case is that we started negotiating with CSR and BT Alstom at about the same sort of period. Had a bit of a hard time in the negotiations, but with both parties. But I can say with a fair amount of confidence that by the end of by the end of this financial year, we will have had a definitive agreement, settlement agreement with Alstom, and TFR have already agreed with them a delivery schedule for the remaining 155 locomotives. It is only in the case of CSR, which oddly, in their case, our order from them was 359 locos, 260 were delivered, and 99 are still outstanding. By November, basically by the end of the year last year, we had all of the agreements with them signed, which is the definitive agreement. In the definitive agreement, one of the key issues we agreed to, in fact, with all of the OEMs, at least with BT and Alstom, is that with Alstom and CSR, is that we have what we call a price war. In the price war, because we allege that we overpaid for the locals. So we need to have a process to prove if so, or we paid the correct amount as per the negotiated. So we appoint a specialist who then looks at the cost of key components, and then on the back of that arrives at, you paid the right amount or you overpaid. That process has been was agreed with the Chinese much sooner. By last year, November, that was all agreed. And even we had agreed what's the delivery schedule for remaining 99 locals that they have. And effectively, in their case as well, which is a little bit unusual to the rest, and I'll talk to these in the next, our materials and reliability support agreements were also signed by December to actually be effective from the 31st of December 2022. However, there were two conditions precedent that needed to be resolved, and unfortunately, our Chinese partners CRRC were of the view that we should solve that problem and try as we might to indicate to them that it is not within our capabilities to solve that problem. All we can do is to understand the situation best as we can, and then make sure that when they come and talk to the regulators, which is SARS, the receiver, as well as SARB, on matters relating to flows, to financial flows in and out of South Africa, they would have to approach SARB, and SARB would have to be the people who unblock. Because as members may recall, that the blockage of their accounts happened as a result of SARB in April, I think between March and April 2019. That was actually the first incident that happened in as far as this contract. And they have to engage with SARB, and they could engage with SARB through the Chinese registered banks in South Africa. So that's number one. Then the other issue was then the issue of tax matters in their tax dealings in South Africa. That, as you know, is a matter between the individual or the company with the receiver of revenue, and no other parties involved in that engagement. But even on that one, we were able to get very far. So unfortunately, because those two matters that require them to then reach a settlement agreement with SARS, which would then enable them to have a tax clearance certificate, at which point we would be able to engage them. they, however, did meet the